I want to open today by asking you something. Yes, you listening in. When did you last rest, truly rest, without feeling like you should be doing something else, without the low hum of guilt underneath it, without earning it first? I ask because for so many of us, that kind of rest, the full, guiltless, unhurried kind, feels almost out of reach. And I've been wondering why that is, where that came from, whose voice that actually is. It's quite evident we live in a world that rewards exhaustion, that hands out gold stars for pushing through, for being the first one up and the last one out. And for some of us, those of us carrying the weight of our parents' sacrifices, our community's hopes, stopping feels almost like betrayal. We come from lineages of people, mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, who wore their busyness like armor, still do. Because in the worlds they navigated, stillness was a luxury they couldn't afford. And because I grew up watching that, without anyone telling me to, on many occasions, I became it. Rest in my family, in my culture, in the body I have inherited, was not something you did. It was something you earned. And even then, you felt guilty for it. Hello, and welcome to Episode 5 of the Inspire Breathwork Podcast. I'm Suks, your host and resident guilty rester, a woman who will fight for your right to do nothing and then silently judge herself for it. Make it make sense? Well, today, I'm sitting with someone who knows exactly what I mean. Someone who has been on this journey with me, not just in the same cohort, but as my learning partner for the last 6 months. Someone I have sat with, spoken with, breathed with for the last 6 months, and been genuinely moved by over these past months. Her name is Zahra Mahomoud. And what she has to say about rest, about what it costs, what it means, and what it can become, I think might change something in you. It sure changed something in me. Zahra, welcome in.
Thank you, Suks. It's so lovely to be here with you.
Zahra, before anything, I just want to say that having you here feels really special to me. You and I have spent a lot of time together these past few months. We've talked about the course, about life, about all the things that are shifting and all the things that are hard. And we've breathed together so many times. I feel like I know you in a way that doesn't always happen so quickly, but fortunately it has happened with us. So before we do anything else, how are you? Not the version you'd give a stranger, the real one.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm a bit nervous. I had a really slow start to my day today, though, which I think has put me in a more of a settled mood today. And yeah, I'm also really excited to have this conversation with you and to discover things with you through this conversation. How are you?
I am mostly excited, a little hot. Yeah, and I think just interested in knowing you in new ways that I haven't before. And I can't believe there are so many multitudes of ways we can get to know each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for bringing me where you are. And it's so you to, go straight to the honest place. So I want to ask you one more thing before we properly begin. And you were just talking to me about it before we got into it. What did it take for you to get here today? Practically, physically, what did your morning look like?
Yeah, so it's Friday today, and I at the moment I don't work on Fridays. So I woke up and was actually feeling really tired this morning. I had a bit of a late night last night. And luckily I had the luxury to stay in bed a little bit longer. So I took that and treated myself to a slightly longer shower this morning than usual. As I said, it's been a really slow morning. I treated myself to a lovely lunch as well that I was part of why I slept late last night, because I was cooking till kind of late. And yeah, that's kind of what brought me here. I did some prayers as well today, which is a practice that I guess is deepening with time and that is so nourishing and gives me so much.
That's so beautiful. I am so happy to hear that managed so much rest for yourself in the ways that you feel rested, because rest can look so different for everyone. And I think why I wanted to even begin with this was because I think these are things we rarely name, the invisible labor of just simply showing up into a space. And sometimes our mornings look different. They are derailed. There are 3 things we have to sort out before we even start. And I love that that's what today's episode is about, the rest, and that you had come into this space with that rest. So, shall we take a breath together before we start? Just like we have before, nothing formal, just arriving.
Yes, that would be lovely. Let's do that.
Whew. Shaking parts of us that we feel need shaking. Looking around the space we're in, the walls, the edges, twisting all the way back to notice something we perhaps haven't in a while. Noticing the textures that surround us, the light around us. And as we breathe in this next breath, softening our gaze or closing our eyes, whatever feels most natural. As we breathe in, letting the breath land wherever it may, whether it's soft or hurried, sharp or smooth. Letting it be how it is. Noticing where the breath is traveling. Can you feel it somewhere specific in your body? In the soles of your feet? In the back of your thighs? In your hands? On your neck or forehead, perhaps? Noticing the temperature of your body as you breathe. And as we let the breath set in, taking the last 3 grounding breaths before we let our senses and our physical body settle back into this space. Gently letting light back into your eyes if they were closed. Noticing again your walls, your relationship to your windows and your door. Discerning for yourself how safe and supported you feel as you move into this conversation. How are you feeling now?
Oh, I feel like I sunk deeper into myself, is the only way I can describe it. And I feel more settled into my space as well. I especially liked looking at where I am in relation to my door and my windows, because looking outside of my window, there's a big tree that is there, of course, all year round. And right now the leaves are really, so thick and so green. And I feel like each time I look out the window and look at that tree, there's something, it looks different somehow, if it's cloudy or if it's sunny. And today it's very still, and I feel like that kind of was imparted on me in some way.
That's amazing. I'm really glad. That's good. I'm here too, and I'm so glad we get to do this. Let's begin. Zahra, for the people who don't know you yet, just tell us who you are, not your healing journey, maybe not even where you're headed. Just what does your life look like right now? What fills your days, your evenings?
Yeah. So I'm a student of my breath, and I'm a student of my body. And I feel that's actually put me in a mode of discovery. So I spend a lot of my days, I start a lot of my days not knowing exactly how I'll fill it. And I kind of approach my days with that sense of curiosity. I do also have a day job. I work as a software engineer. And outside of that, I love to learn, so I'm learning to play the oud at the moment. That's a weekly session that I do. I try and get daily practice, but not always super consistent with it. I'm a dancer, both a student and a practitioner of dance. So whirling is the primary mode of dance that I feel super connected to right now, and I practice the most, I would say. I love to cook, and sometimes I share that cooking with others in kind of gatherings that I feel give me a lot of nourishment, and hopefully also give the people who are there a lot of nourishment, just, eating together. I also just spend some of my day doing nothing a lot of the time and just resting or taking a long bath. And the more I do that, the more, I guess, my ideas around rest and my understanding of what rest is kind of shifts and changes.
Wow. I just discovered there are things in there even I didn't know, which is so interesting. Like I did know a bunch of them. And so I was excited for people to know that. But then there was so much I also just found out, like the fact that you're a dancer was not something I knew. I knew about the whirling, not about that you are a trained dancer. That's amazing. Yeah, there's so much there. And it's actually so beautiful that it's a full life with so many things. I've met so many people who are asked this question, and there's barely three words that get out of their mouth. No shade to anyone where there are only three words. We're all on our own journeys. But the fact that you did identify that you needed multiple things to nourish you, and you found them, and you found the time to find them, because I imagine none of these things came overnight. They were processes and practices that you tried out first just to feel them out. I know that's how I go about a lot of the things I do today. feel them out, and then you invest time and energy into them, and then they grow into these beautiful things. Yeah, it's so exciting to start with one of them, because I do want to get into all of it, honestly. And I feel like I will through the next 2 hours. But just to set the theme for the reason we're having this conversation and to start with one of those things, I would love to request you to take me back to how breathwork came into your life. What was that first encounter like? What did you make of it?
Yeah, so my first encounter with, I guess, conscious connected breathing would have been during lockdown, which I think is the case for many people. I was actually really unhappy at the time when I discovered breathwork. I was in quite a difficult relationship and felt quite lonely and isolated at the time. And I was kind of looking for different things to kind of help give me some form of relief. But I actually didn't really know what breathwork was when I was going into it. I thought it would be more of a kind of mindfulness type of breathing session. And then when I joined, the facilitator started playing this incredible music and was like counting my breath or counting people's breath. And it just wasn't something I'd experienced before. And it wasn't long before I started to feel these sensations in my body that I've just never felt before. And like tingling and things like that all over my body. And my first session was actually such medicine, like, which I feel really fortunate for, because I think it can take a long time for people to kind of receive the fruits of breath work. And I remember when I was coming out of that session, just as it was ending, sometimes you get a big rush after you kind of stop doing the conscious connected breath. And in this case, the rush that I had was like a big rush of insight, or like a download almost, because I kind of gone in thinking about my relationship and what I should do and that sort of thing. And it was a very kind of Zen insight of like, there is no right or wrong path. Some are just more painful than others. And it's just a case of being discerning, but also trusting. And I haven't stopped doing breathwork since then. And of course, there are times where I do it daily or twice a day. And then there are times where I go for long stretches of time without doing it. But yeah, it's kind of, as you were saying before, you kind of try out new things and things just stick through that process of discovery. And I feel like breathwork was definitely one of them. I also think there was a lot of grace in the fact that it was online during lockdown, because I had my camera off, my microphone was off. I was in a place that I found comfortable and safe. I didn't have to worry about like being seen in a vulnerable state or anything like that. And it really worked for me at the time. Yeah.
Thanks for taking me down that really sweet memory. I know you and I have talked about this before, and we had a very similar-ish start to how it came to us and the beginnings of the experiences we had. It's been interesting to me, actually, this how digitalization has definitely its cons that we talk about every day. Yet there are all these beautiful things that it has allowed us to do, and it's allowed us to do them without having exposed our most vulnerable selves right from the get-go, which is something we are kind of moving through with this course as well, right? The discernment of what feels safe at what time. And so often during our classes as well, I know so many of us have our faces on, sometimes we don't. And it is what allows us to have attention and participation in that day. And that's been beautiful for me through the course. I really love so many parts of that journey. To go deeper with that a little bit, What point was it for you where this practice, which now you said you have been doing for 6 years, on and off, wherever, at stretches for longer periods of time, at stretches with breaks, what point was it where this shifted from something you were doing for yourself to something you wanted to bring to others? What made you train? And then also, why Inspire Breathwork specifically?
Yeah, so this was actually, I feel like it was a question that crept up on me and kind of grew louder and louder the more I ignored it. And it was definitely something that I resisted for a really long time. Because despite like feeling the personal benefits of breath work, I always felt that in order to enter the healing world, because I have no like formal background in healing or anything like that, and have generally felt kind of, besides breath work, have generally felt kind of far removed from wellness spaces. And in my mind, I thought in order to be a healer or a facilitator, you've kind of really got to have your like stuff together, basically. But with time, I realized that actually it's about the level of presence that you're able to bring and the sincerity and how much attention and care you can bring to a space. And there was actually one particular moment that kind of gave me the reassurance that I needed, that this was something that I could do, and that I didn't have to resist stepping into. And it was a moment with my nephew. He was just a couple of months old at the time. Still couldn't speak, couldn't like express with language in a way that we understand it, at least. And he, at the time, was a bit of a Velcro baby. So anytime someone so much as came into the room, he would cry if it wasn't his mum, my sister. So there was one particular moment where I went into the room, I sat next to him, and he started crying. And I was kind of remembered, it's that thing of returning, isn't it? I kind of returned to this idea of like, okay, he's crying and that's totally fine. Let's make space for that and hold space for that. And within 10 seconds, he stopped crying and he planted his face into mine, which is something that just had never happened before. And being able to have that experience with, this baby, kind of something just clicked, and I was like, maybe I can step into the world of healing. And maybe you don't actually have to have everything together. And so I looked into various courses, and I came across Inspire Breathwork. It was probably the second or third course that I came across. And I just remember reading the copy and just feeling this huge sense of relief to the point of tears, where I was like, this is incredible. Like, here is a course that acknowledges that wellness isn't an individual problem, it's a systemic one. And that also honors and acknowledges the ancient roots of breathwork, that it's not a production of the West, that it's something that's been imported and it is rooted in a really rich culture and tradition. And also, taking wellness away from this idea of the self and us being purely responsible for our well-being, and understanding, like delving into this kind of more decolonized practice. And I was so excited. I came home and I told my sister about it and told her, look, I found a course that I want to do. And I remember that conversation because of my sister was like, gosh, I've never seen you this excited. I haven't seen you this excited in a long time.
That is so wonderful. And I really felt so deeply when you were sharing some of that. The moment when babies respond to you is definitely one of those profound seconds where you're just like, wow, if I can connect here, what more am I capable of? And I also resonated very deeply with the bit where you said you didn't feel like you could enter the wellness space because you didn't have any sort of background in it. And I think I had a very similar moment where I was like, oh, but I don't have any certifications and I don't have any degrees to say I can do this work. And then slowly, for me, I think I moved to this place where I am, Oroville. And anytime I spoke to somebody about maybe volunteering with them or trying to get involved with something they were doing, they would reach back out to me asking me, okay, what do you do with your time? What are your gifts? What are your talents? Instead of asking me anything else. And that kind of slowly started allowing me to believe that it matters more what my gifts are than what a piece of paper says my certification is. And then slowly that unlearning started around the systemic structures that brought me to a point of thinking without a degree, I'm not worth much. Yeah, I resonated with a lot of that. That was so sweet. For anyone listening who might not know, Zahra and I both are in year 1 of the Inspire Breathwork Facilitator training. We're in class together. We're learning partners, which means we've been regularly meeting outside of class too, checking in on each other, processing what's coming up. Many times we've actually just turned up to the session and talked about our friendships and our love lives and nothing else at all. So some of what we're also going to talk about is material we've literally been sitting with together, sometimes just days ago, sometimes hours ago even. And so to bring back into perspective, I am curious which unit or class of this year has genuinely stayed with you? Which one do you find yourself still thinking about?
It has to be the class where Hannah introduced the FIRE framework, which, just for background, it's a framework that helps expand our understanding of ancestry beyond just familial ancestry, and to think about the ancestry that we connect with in terms of our ideology, our relationships with animals, with plants, with certain areas in the world and beyond, and with the elements. And for me, that's something that I just haven't stopped thinking about since I heard it. And it's completely shifted it's really expanded my ancestors, basically, and the ancestors that I feel are available to me and that I can connect to. And it's also made me more intentional about that as well. So before that, I'd never even considered that the ideological part, for example, and as a Muslim, as a practicing Muslim, it completely shifted how I engaged with that, and how I saw, the figures, the prophets and the companions that are spoken about in religious texts, and instead of seeing them as these kind of I think that the journey kind of started before as well, but this really cemented it and accelerated it. Instead of seeing them as these kind of distant role models, I felt that a much kind of deeper connection there, and almost kind of sense them as these kind of archetypes that I can, if I align myself or enter a certain state, I can kind of embody what they embodied, right? And repeating the words that they once said is a way of being connected to them as well. And so I guess in that way, it also expanded my sense of community as well. And with the elemental ancestry part as well, I think I think most people love being by the sea and love water. And that's something that I've always loved as well. But this discussion and that lesson really, and there have been other lessons as well that have deepened and kind of made my understanding of what water does for me like more specific. And so, for instance, like there was one particular lesson where we were able to link water as being a really important element for me to kind of meet my anger, you know? So yeah, and it's also the lesson that comes up a lot the most in my conversations with friends and with family as well. And it's really fun just seeing their eyes light up and have them kind of rattle off like their list of relational ancestors or elemental ancestors. Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that class being very emotional, but also just as whimsical and sweet. Like whoever was in whichever state of mind brought that forward. And to suddenly find ourselves like connected with our favorite, not favorite, but like the animals we feel most connected to. And like you said, water. And we were just talking about how it's hot where I am, and you asked me if it's going to pass. And then the reality of my existence with water is the same. Like I know how much I love the sea, and I had no access to it till I was about 20 years old. And I, for the first time, went to the coast of my country and witnessed the sea and experienced it, and then just couldn't leave it. And so now forever, I know I'm going to live by the sea. And it doesn't matter how hot it is. It's just things you can't let go of because they are a part of you. And you're right. I think that framework really helped identify so much of that for ourselves. I also wanted to talk about how for me, I wouldn't say that I'm referring to the most impactful class that stayed with me, but just on Tuesday, the class we were a part of, and there was something that came up. Hannah had given us some time to go into our breakout rooms and talk about what it is that we loved the most about the things we had just discussed. And there was something that you had actually reached out to me afterwards to ask, because we weren't in the same breakout room, but Ramon, who was in the breakout room with me, told you later that something I had said had really like he'd really appreciated it and you wanted to know it. Would you remind me a little bit of the context of I remember what I said, but I'm a little lost on which bits we were reflecting on specifically. Do you recollect it?
Yeah, if I remember correct, I think it was. So Hannah had covered kind of the kind of scientific underpinnings of breathwork, and different, I guess, ways of understanding that as well. So she brought in like the psychedelics and the reverb. I remember that because of the frog that Natalie.
Oh, yes.
And then the breakout room was for talking about which part of what was covered we're most excited about.
Right, right.
Is that...
I do recollect now. I feel like it was that part where we had started talking about how relevant carbon dioxide is to our breathing process. And I had read a lot about it in that book by James Nestor called Breath, which is also part of our reading list. And at that time also I had felt this. And then when we went over the specifics, the science behind why exactly carbon dioxide is just as important in our breathing process as oxygen is. And then we went into our breakout rooms to discuss. This was one of the things we had talked about in all the science. And what I said was what I loved the most was that we're kind of sitting down and redefining what we were taught as children, because I don't know a single education system that has not gone into class and said, okay, oxygen is good, carbon dioxide is bad. Carbon dioxide is something that plants need, but humans don't. And the same way with everything, right? Like poop is bad, carbon dioxide is bad. And there are all these labels that we put to things, the good and the bad. And I love that we redefined all of that with actual evidence. And we were able to see all of this as just as relevant to our experience, which one gives us more context on how our body is functioning. And two, it again unlearns and breaks down the binary concepts of good and bad. And that is all that we're talking about with decolonization, right? To remove that binary, to also value the things that have just been labeled as one or the other, just to make education simpler. And then I also feel like to expand on that, this is not something I said in class, but right now is coming up for me. I feel like for us to assume that a child's mind, the age, at whatever age this is being taught in school, for us to assume that a child's mind can only take black and white and does not have space for understanding that this thing is also important, but in its own way, is kind of reductive of us as adults setting up that education system. Because I truly believe like a child's mind takes in a lot more with a lot less, like a lot more contradiction with a lot less friction than we do as adults. In fact, as adults, there's so much conditioning. By that point, you are struggling with taking in the gray, and you do actually keep trying to make it black and white so that it's not as overwhelming to handle. But a child actually is very comfortable with just taking in whatever's being thrown at them. So I was really happy that that tiny version of me now had all these other answers. And some of this I had studied about during my freediving days, because so much of that had to do with managing the increased capacity of CO2 in our body while it's changing with pressure as you go under and stuff. But it was really nice to do it in this, format with new language. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. And it's so true as well. I feel like this course has reframed so much and allowed me to revisit so much and think about things in a almost inverse way to the way that I usually would. And I loved what you said about children as well. I find like that children, I've probably met more wise children than I've met like wise adults. Sometimes they just have a way of like cutting through the BS and like getting straight to the point. And I feel like, yeah, we do well as a culture to kind of place more trust in the wisdom that children carry and the truth telling as well, you know. Yeah. But yeah, thank you. That was, really cool.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I'm so glad you agree with that. The kids bit especially.
Yeah.
Because I keep trying to like if I'm walking around in my street and there are parents like telling kids how to do things a certain way, I just want to there's this deep urge to intervene and say things, but I have to keep it to myself so many times. Yeah, so it's nice to have someone on the same team.
Definitely.
So going a little further into the course, for something that's very, very alive in me and in all of us these days because we've been in it, I want to talk about the fishbowl as well. Because for people inside the course, this will be very familiar. And for people outside it, I think it's very worth explaining. So for anyone listening, a fishbowl is a supervised one-on-one breathwork session between two students, one facilitating, one breathing. It's one of the first times we're actually in the facilitator role with another real person in front of us. Not theory, not practice that's running in our heads. It's a real person trusting you with their breath. And we did have these sessions in Unit 3 with Hannah posting the fishbowls as a template of how they would look, where she was the facilitator for each one of us in every week. And then we moved into Unit 4 a couple of weeks ago, where we've started practicing with each other while the rest of the cohort has been observing and have been doing feedback sessions with us later on. And I feel like they've been some of the most, I don't even think I have words for it yet. But yeah, I'm curious how it's been for you, Zahra.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. It's been such an incredible experience, and I probably will also struggle to find the words for it. So like from the perspective of like being an observer within the fishbowl, it's like the first thing is that it's actually felt like such a privilege to be able to witness like our group learning and growing and practicing for the first time. And the learning that comes from that has been incredible. Like it's to reflect on their experience, and it just leads to such like a rich discussion of, and I really love the format that we've been using, particularly in this unit where we are giving feedback to each other on our breathwork sessions, of using the rose format for feedback. And I feel like it's just been really, like it's changed the ways that I listen and observe. And it's also changed the ways that I give feedback. And it's also changed the ways that I participate in the breathwork sessions. And it's also really expanded my idea of what a breathwork session looks like, because each one has been so different. And it's just reaffirmed that the breath really is just about creating space and presence to explore what's moving through someone in any given moment. And once you create that space, there's no way of kind of predicting what will come through. And yeah, it just feels like a process of discovery. And from a participant lens, like in the times where I've I actually haven't given a breathwork session yet, but when I've been on the receiving end of facilitation by Hannah and also Natalie, I remember kind of in the build up to it feeling a bit nervous about being seen by the group. But as soon as the session started, I felt this incredible connection to the group, and I could feel just the presence of everybody, almost like making a bigger container for what was coming up for me. And yeah, it's been a great experience. Yeah, even with the nerves.
So you said that you've not been in the facilitator position yet. Just a little question on that. What is the thing you're most afraid of as you step into holding space for others? Is there a version of yourself you're worried might show up in the facilitator seat?
Yeah, I think there is a very specific fear of like the dissociation that happens. And this is just based on the patterns that I've noticed in myself. And then through that dissociation, kind of not being able to offer the presence that I would like to offer to the person who's choosing to breathe with me. But I've also kind of been exploring the dissociation a bit more in my more recent breathwork sessions. And, I'm learning to kind of stay with it. And even though it is a very elusive sensation to pin down, just because of the nature of dissociation, it's like, the whole thing is like a lack of connection, right? So it's hard to connect to it. it's been, there are actually sensations that underpin it. There's a movement to it, I think. And I think being aware of that will help me maybe ground in those sessions. And yeah, be present with my breather, hopefully. I would love to hear about your experience facilitating, actually, and what kind of things came up for you, and yeah, how you've been experiencing these kind of fishbowl sessions as somebody who has actually participated as a facilitator.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like for me, there were parts that I did enjoy, and then there were parts that mostly just pushed me to the point of nervousness that I couldn't perform as well. Um, I think I came in with this sort of script in my mind and on my paper. Um, And that's what's helped me all my life. I've been a writer, a speaker, and so scripting has been like second nature to me, almost first nature to me, to be honest, because I don't think there's been any conversation, any emotional conversation I've had without having it down in my notes first. Like 7 versions of it in my notes actually before I've gone and spoken to the person it's about or it's with. So it was only natural for me to do that. But when I did show up in that space, I think there were parts that I felt satisfied with at the end. And then there were parts which led me to some of my most breakthrough realizations about what's happening inside my body. So at the end, it's actually beautiful that it happened. But what it brought me to was realizing how much performance there is in my body, in my experience of life at large. So I've been sitting with that thought since a while now, since the last 3 weeks, because 3 weeks ago is when I had been the facilitator for the first time. And it's funny because when you are the breather, like I was the breather first. So when I was the breather, I knew exactly what was working for me. And I was like, okay, great. Now I have like almost a blueprint of what this feels like and what it is. And then you think, of course, replicating this shouldn't be tough. And then you get to it, and then suddenly everything feels like, oh, but this person is not responding the same way I thought they would respond. But that's the thing, like the idea of something being breather led, which is something that Hannah has been inculcating and trying to help us embody more and more. We are not used to those things. So I think that showed up very hugely for me, especially from the culture I come from. Not just my larger culture as an Indian, also my immediate familial culture. There is this idea that you go out into the world as a polished version of yourself, not as someone who is still trying and failing. And so I feel like it got me to realizations that I have quite often in life not tried enough things because I was not comfortable trying them in front of people. And yeah, I've been working on that. I've been doing some, I've been doing breathwork sessions with someone called Pip. Pepa Rain actually is her name. She is one of Hannah's students who has already completed her course and has been taking on clients and is in the middle of her research thesis for the course. And it's been really wonderful. I've done 3 weeks of sessions with her so far. And a lot of this has come up, but I've also found myself I suppose taking on that journey with a lot of stride and excitement. And I don't think there's been a moment before in my life where I have felt excited to continue trying at something that I personally felt I didn't do well at or failed at. even if I don't use the words fail, didn't do so well. I didn't do the way I would have wanted to. And yeah, this is something Katie is another person in our cohort, and her and I also spoke about this, that we've never had a moment before where we were excited about trying something and getting better at it and failing. And I think that says a lot about the group we're in, about the space we have inculcated as a cohort, because I couldn't have seen myself feel that way after how harsh it also felt to receive that feedback, because it was harsh. I did feel like it stayed with me for a couple of weeks. That feeling of, wow, there were a lot of thorns and very little roses, and I obviously didn't do well. And so many of the people did do beautifully. Like, I know that Shika was just one of the most beautiful sessions I've witnessed ever. Nat with you was fabulous. So I know that I didn't shine as bright, but to accept that and to keep moving with it has been a revelation for me. And I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying not preparing for things and doing my worst at things. Yeah.
That's really awesome. It sounds like you're going through such a powerful and like liberating realization and uncovering so many deep insights into yourself. And yeah, just want to recognize the courage it takes to stay with that. And the fact that you're feeling excitement, Katie's feeling excitement. I think I felt that excitement too at times. Yeah, I think it definitely does speak to our group and to the ways that these sessions are held as well. And also, your session was really beautiful. And I know there were learnings from it and there were thorns. But I just remember being struck by how poetic it was and how the connectedness that you brought into it. Like, there were some things that there are feelings that I kind of felt as you were speaking that have kind of stayed with me, and the things you said around, like, the walls are here for you and your environment is a living, breathing part of your life that is there for you. And it's, yeah, like there have definitely been things that have stayed with me from your session. So just wanted to say that out loud.
Thank you so much. That does really help. Honestly, like, yeah, I've been a big propagator of the idea of, if you are getting support and help and encouragement, take it, because honestly, it's a privilege. Yeah. So anytime that happens for me, instead of going like, oh yeah, that's okay, I don't really need to hear that, I'm just like, yeah, thanks for like taking the time to encourage me to do something and try it again. Yeah, it means a lot.
Yeah, that's something I've been getting better at too, actually. And I realized as well that when I reflect something back to someone that is coming from a genuine place, and the response is like, oh, like they kind of downplay it, I feel like, how dare you? Like, that was a sincere thing. Like, I feel kind of unappreciated. So it kind of feels like a gift as well to be able to receive it well when other people kind of are able to, when people reflect back the parts of us that, they see shining. Yeah.
I find this really interesting about you. It's the way that you've been weaving healing into the spaces that you already inhabit, not creating a separate wellness corner of your life, but actually bringing it into things you love already, things you are already doing. And I'm curious if you would talk to me more about that. What does that look like for you?
I love this question. I think, honestly, it starts with acknowledging all the ways that spaces that aren't branded, or practices that haven't been branded or categorized as wellness or healing, actually are wellness and healing, or do promote wellness and healing. And a lot of that is kind of, traditions that that my mum has passed down to me, or routines and rituals that around my faith and things like that, where people I've been engaging with since I was little, and my family have been, there's a long line of people who've been engaging with these practices and passing it down. And the way I see it is, so integrating what I'm learning here, it is really complementary. And in two ways. I think the first way is actually that it's giving me a language to be able to speak about healing in ways that feel resonant to me and to my community. And the second is around the kind of the breathwork practices and the ability to hold space, and even just like how to word specific parts of, the framing of your breathwork session and things like that. And it's been really fun to look at the different ways I can bring breathwork into what I'm already doing. So for instance, with the supper club, the dinners that I've been hosting, that was originally I feel like the reason I kind of created that space aligns so beautifully with everything that we've been learning on the course. It really was about bringing people together to remember that we are held in a community, and to connect with each other, to connect with food, and to also connect with my ancestry as well through cooking that food. So I cook Somali food, and so the last session I did, for the first time, I included a little bit of grounding at the beginning, which it was actually not very long. It was maybe 5 minutes, and I thought it would be a really good way to start because it would kind of allow people to drop into their bodies, and I feel like it's always good to be reminded that we're not here to perform, which sometimes, in the London social scene, it can feel like people are bringing like their networking kind of personalities into situations, or feel the need to mask, which, masking is important and it is needed. But I wanted to create a space where people knew that it was okay not to feel that need to mask, and where they felt that they could come exactly as they are. And there's nothing to fix, nothing to change, and that they could get whatever they wanted out of the couple of hours that they would be spending eating with other people. And this is something that's still developing. I think it's in my next one, I might try something different. I might try a slightly longer grounding session. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that kind of shapes up.
Yeah, I know how much I loved hearing about this when we did talk about it in our learning partner session months ago. And so when I was kind of thinking about the things I want to talk to you about today, this was one of the things I definitely wanted to bring up, or have you bring up, essentially. Because you're right, like cooking for so many of us comes from this space of love and care, because we've picked it up sitting next to our mothers in the kitchen. At least I have, and I imagine so many others have. And then to be able to cook the food that you grew up eating, cuisine that comes from your land, has so much value. And it is one of those practices that already is of love and grounding, cooking and eating, which is meant to be done in community. And then to add this element, I don't even know if you knew it while you were doing it, but this is essentially the base of mindfulness as a practice. I did happen to do a small course in mindfulness. It's called MBSR more specifically, which is mindfulness-based stress research, where neuroscientists came up with MBSR as a practice to work with people with mental health challenges or chronic pains, to be able to manage those things better and not run away from them. And one of the first exercises we did on day one of that course, which was an 8-week course, was that the person teaching us, she sent a box of raisins around, and each one of us picked a raisin. And then we spent 15 minutes eating that one raisin, each one of us. And that was our first lesson in mindfulness. So I don't know if you had reference that this is essentially mindfulness, but you did bring it in without even trying.
That sounds like such a great experience. And I actually didn't know that was part of a mindfulness practice. So it's really cool that we've kind of come to the same thing independently. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you've also been exploring some practices for grounding yourself. You already mentioned that you've been a dancer, and I think whirling is something then that you came around that was something very particular to you, a thing that connects you to your body. Can you tell us a little about that? Is does it feel closer to your lineage, or where did it come from? How did you come into it? What does it feel like in your body?
Yeah, so the whirling was actually something that I had heard about, this kind of dervishing, but had never kind of ventured into or even considered it. And it wasn't until I went to a festival last summer called Rumi Fest, which is kind of in the spirit of Sufism. And there was a whirler there, and I actually missed her performance, but we were chatting afterwards, and I discovered that what she does, and I spoke about kind of my dance background, and the more I learned about whirling in that conversation, the more I realized this is exactly what I felt like the dance sessions that I'd been attending before were kind of missing. And so she invited me to kind of train with her teacher. And I remember going to that first session, and it was basically the difference with whirling is that you can actually master the technique quite quickly. It only took one session for me to kind of, like, once you have the basic technique down, the rest of it is just surrender and trust and giving yourself permission to release and to let go. And I think that's what has kind of made whirling stick for me, is because once I'm in that state and I'm spinning, there's just something that happens and I think there's an element of it as well. So you're while whirling, there's, with your gaze, you kind of have like a soft gaze where you're not like fully focusing on anything, because that can really take you out of it. And so everything's kind of a blur as you're whirling, and there's a tremendous amount of trust that goes into that. But it doesn't feel like, and I early on I felt like I needed to kind of develop that trust, but now I'm able to see it as almost as a form of channeling something, because also doing it as a group kind of intensifies the energy. And it's a really difficult thing to describe, but it's like my thoughts just switch off, and there's a lot of symbolism with whirling as well. So traditionally you kind of have your left hand down and your right hand up in kind of the more traditional Mevlevi Sufi order way of doing it, which isn't the way that I practice. But I think there's so much beauty in that, because the left hand symbolizes your connection to earth and to the material world, and that reminder that kind of spirituality is an embodied experience. Whereas the right hand kind of pointing up to the sky is kind of our openness to inspiration and to being able to being able to kind of channel these qualities of, divine love or mercy or whatever it is that wants to come through at any given time. Yeah, I feel like I could talk about whirling for a long time, so I'm gonna stop here.
That's actually, thank you for taking me through that journey, for taking everyone on that journey, because the way you described it, I think also held a lot of value in the words you used and the way you described your experience of opening yourself up to surrender. Yeah, I almost feel like it was a thing I wanted to be doing right now, almost, because like I said, I have been and still am on many levels struggling with the idea of performance and how much of my existence already exists in it. And this, as much as I wanted to be doing it right now, it also was bringing up these feelings of anxiety. Literally just thinking of it was bringing up anxiety for me right now, around, yeah, especially when you said that thing about the soft gaze, how you're not trying to focus anywhere, but you have a soft gaze, which means that I was thinking about where would my mind be at that time? What is it doing? Do you have answers to this?
Oh, well, first of all, it's actually really common for people to feel like, oh, this is so nerve-wracking. Like, how am I? That's how I felt when I first went into into my first session. But to answer your question about the mind part, it quietens, I think. It's not that it's not there fully, actually. It's still there. But I've definitely noticed that, I guess, so there's kind of a bit of a journey that happens with the mind. If I look back on the times where I've whirled, it's like initially, and of course it depends day to day as well, but generally speaking, initially you're kind of like thinking about whatever you've brought with you from your day, or like the technique or how your feet feel in that particular moment. But the longer you keep whirling and the more you drop into it, there is definitely a shift. Sometimes it's gradual, sometimes it's instant, where the thoughts just become more sparse. And even when they do come, you're so like fully in the experience that it doesn't really stick, or it doesn't bother you that it's there. It's kind of, you're just able to meet that thought better, or kind of observe it, or let it go. It's almost like you just are. There's no pressure to be anything other than what you are in that moment. But yeah, I think it is really hard. I've got a session later today. I think I'm going to go into that session with this question on my mind. What happens?
Where does your mind go?
Whirling?
Yeah. Is it something more like, if there is a thought passing, also you will let it pass and you just acknowledge that, thoughts exist, because that is our mind's purpose and its job. So it's doing its job, and you just let the thought flow through you?
I guess on some level, yeah. It wouldn't be as conscious as that. But I think there's definitely like a direct experience of that, where it's like your reaction to the thought is almost like, okay, yeah, it's there. And then before you know it, you're like thinking about something else.
Yeah, because thoughts go by so quickly in the mind also. That's real. It's like,
Yeah.
Did
But I
you
would love
know
to,
that actually... Go on.
I was going to say, it would be, if you're up for it, I would love for us to, if you want to explore it, to do a bit of whirling in one of our learning partner sessions, if it's something you're curious about. But
yeah,
don't need to
I'm
answer.
Curious and I'm anxious. Yeah, I'm going to sit with that anxiousness for a little bit for sure. And then, yeah, I feel like there were some workshops that happened here also. I remember my mindfulness teacher going for them, actually, like 6 or 7 months ago, before I started this course. So Yeah. Yeah, but I am curious. So, yes, maybe. Thank you for that offer. Maybe I will come around to it at some point. Hmm. Whew. Sarah, I want to go somewhere a little more personal now, if that feels okay for you. Not that any of this has been not personal, but just maybe more activated moments. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So, this episode is really about rest and specifically how hard rest is for people like you, people like me, so many of us, people who were raised in one way or another to actually earn their place. Can you take me to a specific moment, not the general exhaustion, but that one particular moment maybe where something in you said, this is enough. I can't keep going on like this.
I think there have been moments for sure where I've gotten really close to that point of not being able. Well, actually, I should have stopped, but I didn't. And I ignored the signals in my body. And because I had been in that mode of surviving for so long, and I couldn't remember what it felt like to be in a state that was the opposite of that. I honestly feel like I would have just kept going. But what changed things for me was the first time I experienced the opposite, basically, of my usual state of being in survival mode. And that was at the festival that I mentioned before, where I discovered the whirling. That was basically 3 days of feeling so connected to people and so connected to nature and so able to be exactly who I am. And it felt, I mean, there were difficult things that came up there for sure as well, but it felt like there was space for that. And so when I came back from that festival and was expected to kind of log into work the next day, I think there was something about the contrast of like the experience that I just had there and being back in my usual environment. And it kind of put my body back into the state that I was in before the festival. And for it to happen so quickly, I realized just how heavy it was and how awful it was and how unsustainable it was. And actually that my body had been asking me to rest for probably years. And so I wasn't able to go back to work, and I took some time off work for a little bit. And that ended up just being, I think maybe there was a lot of grief in the first, I think probably still grieving now, but the grief was really loud, like the first month or so, I would say. And, but through staying with that grief and having the space to do that, I think it actually ended up being a really restorative time for me and deeply transformational as well, looking back.
It sounds transformational also, and I can empathize with that, stark contrast of moving from that one physical space into another. I'm curious, how was the bodily experience of all of this?
The thing that I remember the most is the heaviness. Like it felt like it just took so much effort to move. And I could really just feel the weight of my limbs. I think as well, there was a feeling of almost sinking in like a sinking feeling in my gut. This anticipation of like, when you're anticipating that something bad's about to happen, or actually the opposite, where like something's going really well, and then you realize all of a sudden that something it wasn't actually going as well as you thought or something like that. And there's that sinking feeling in your stomach. It was that, but it wasn't a single moment. It kind of just felt like a constant companion for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, holding that sinking feeling, which I think comes often with a lot of tenderness for you. And you said you ended up taking a break from work post this. Did rest eventually feel guilt-free, not like a failure at some point through this process of the break? And what did that feel like?
Yeah, I think there were definitely moments where rest felt so just invigorating, and I think it's really hard to feel guilty if you're having a good time, so and interestingly, a lot of the time, because rest looks so different for different people, and even within the same person on any given day, it's different. And I find a lot of rest in movement. And so the times where I was dancing as a form of rest, it's just really hard for me to feel guilt, actually. I think it's definitely something I struggled with before, especially around like the resourcing of it. And like, am I really going to spend money to like move my body to some music with a bunch of people? So what did that feel like in my body was that the second part of your question? Sorry. How did it feel to not feel guilty? Yeah. It feels like joy. Yeah. And there's a kind of warmth to it. And just this sense of like being fully present in the moment as well, and letting go of any expectations, and to bring that back to my body. I think there's definitely a stronger sense of feeling grounded where I am. So like actually being fully present in my body, and feeling, if I'm standing, like feeling more connected to my feet. But like, and also I think a sense of flow as well. It's really interesting to think about this, because like the moments I'm thinking of have all been while dancing. So it's like, how does my body feel while I'm dancing and I'm enjoying myself? And yeah, there's also excitement, I think. And of course, my heart rate is higher than it usually would be. And I'm usually maybe sweating a little bit as well. But yeah, the warmth is definitely present.
That was so sweet to hear, that moment where you said, I'm realizing I'm thinking of moments where I'm usually dancing. It's so cute. Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. I definitely am somebody who struggles to do that also in front of people. I used to struggle. Okay, this is one I can throw as I used to proudly throw it as that. But it changed for me very late in life, at least late in my mind. Like I think 24 was the first time I remember freely dancing for the first time. And that was, yeah, I wasn't even 10 years ago from what age I'm at today. So yeah, that's beautiful. I actually want to read you something that is very deeply resonant of the things we've just spoken about, and it's become something of a personal manifesto for me. It's by Nicola Jane Hobbs, and it goes, growing up, I never knew a relaxed woman. Successful women, yes. Productive women, plenty. Anxious and afraid and apologetic women, heaps of them. But relaxed women, at ease women, women who don't dissect their days into half-hour slots of productivity, women who prioritize rest and pleasure and play, women who aren't afraid to take up space in the world, women who give themselves unconditional permission to relax without guilt, without apology, without feeling like they need to earn it. I'm not sure I've ever met a woman like that, but I would like to become one. What comes up for you when you hear that?
Wow. Yeah. Like the whole time I was listening, I was thinking, yes, yes, yes. And I was also thinking, I want to be that woman. And that's exactly how that little passage ends. You know, I want to become that. I think it's just so true, isn't it? There really aren't a great deal of women who have felt like they can relax or live a softer life, one that doesn't need to be earned, as the passage said. But I'm also noticing now that there's so much more, I'm seeing more of it. Like I am noticing that I've seen that, like a lot of the conversations that I have with my women friends center rest a lot more than they used to. I'm also kind of noticing all the ways that even with my mom, for instance, me and my siblings would kind of talk about how worried we are that she's just always on her feet, always doing something around the house and all of that stuff. And I had a conversation with her. We had a conversation with her about that. And she said to us, I love doing these things. And for me, it feels restful. And like that conversation with her completely shifted my perspective on what rest can look like as well. And also it reminded me of just like how the culture that I grew up in kind of conditioned me to view rest as such a limited thing and to kind of see acts of service and acts of care as work. And I feel like care is so devalued that it's almost impossible for people to think that it can be a restful thing for somebody to do because it's coming from a place of love and like wanting to nurture and so yeah, that's what it's brought up for me. So actually, just to extend,
please go on.
Just to finish that thought.
Yeah.
It's also like it makes me think about like how can I, instead of viewing rest as like this distant thing that I have to reach for or try and make space for, how can I integrate rest into my life? And that's something that that conversation with my mom, like when I reflect on it and just in general, like how the time that I've spent resting has taught me is that like you don't actually have to be doing anything particularly restful or joyful for you to find rest in it. It's all it takes is just viewing what you're doing differently or like bringing mindfulness into it. So if you're washing the dishes, you can do that in a way that is restful. And I think that's quite like it's just such a powerful thing to be able to do because it's available to everyone, right? To all the women who are burnt out and stressed and all of that.
Yeah. I value that reflection so much because it was definitely not where my mind goes to when I read a lot of this. And I want to sit with that more and find more empathy towards that thought as you have been able to. I struggle a bit though, because the same conversations when I've had with my mother, and I think some of what she's got back to me with was not always that this is restful for me and that acts of care can be restful. It's also that there is no one else to do this, so it has to be done. And I suppose also the physical toll a lot of this takes, because acts of care are beautiful, but if they can't also happen towards yourself, and recognizing that our mothers, these women from our lineages, are in their older years now, where your body is at a different stage of its health. It has been through menopause. It's lost a lot of its, nutrient content that is supposed to keep your muscles strong. So much of that goes through my mind, and it leaves me in a really difficult place to find empathy for this expression almost. So I really value your contribution right now, because I would like to get there, to find some empathy for this experience when moms turn around and say, that this is love for me. Because I also question how a lot of these concepts came around, in their time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's such an important point and such an important thing to bring in. Thank you. Yeah, and that was just my one conversation that I had with my mom, and that's just my mom's experience. But it 100% is not the case if we're talking at a more broader, societal level. Women are exhausted, and there are so many women carrying labor that isn't recognized because of the expectations that's been put on them. Whether that's our mothers or anybody else, any other women in a role of a daughter, or even outside of our familial roles. I know, for instance, that a lot of in the workplace, women are kind of disproportionately expected to carry more while not being recognized for that work. And so I think, a really important point there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad there was different perspectives here, so that we got to empathize with each other and find some space for both of those eventually, I imagine. As a first generation woman, who you and me both, I imagine, as the daughter of the story you come from, what does this rest as defiance actually mean in your life?
I feel like I'm actually moving away from seeing rest as defiance now. There was definitely a time where that served me 100%. But even the idea of defiance and resistance, I feel like it's really difficult to change a system if you're resisting it, because you're still kind of operating within the same paradigm of that system. And when you apply that to rest, I think it almost makes rest stop being rest. It kind of takes the rest out of rest and turns it into another thing to do. And so the approach that I take now with rest is instead to invite more of what I want into my life, to view rest as how can I care for myself today? How can I love myself today? And I know that it is defiant. I think it's just kind of framing it in that way that can take the restfulness out of it for me. And what that looks like is, it really varies day to day. But it does, I guess, always start with actually listening for what my body needs, and checking in. I've mentioned before that dance is a really big part of me feeling of rest for me. Sometimes it's sleeping in, other times it's, listening to music. One of the things that I really love and find super restorative is taking a long rose and lavender bath. I find so much healing and medicine in those herbs in particular. And some of my kind of faith-based practices, so praying and the kind of deep somatic experience that offers me, like putting my head on the ground, that's deeply restful. And I think connecting with people too is super restful. So, with my friends in particular, I find a lot of rest in that.
That really filled my heart. I love that part you opened with about how rest is not defiance for you. Thank you for redefining that. I think you're doing Hannah's work right now, at least for me and everyone else listening, just allowing space for redefining a lot of what we have seen as the base of what we're even trying to move towards. And you're right. I mean, if we keep seeing this idea as something we're fighting against, then it's quite hard to build a new world. And you've set a really nice example with all of these practices, what your new world looks like, with rest as just a omnipresent part of it instead of something you're going out of your way to add. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that so much for you. I feel like this break you took from work, as inevitable as it was, has really, really transformed a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, massively, massively. I'm like a completely different person, and it feels like a lifetime ago, actually.
Yeah, I love that. Even though it wasn't, because we've only started the course like 6 months ago. And I remember talking to you about this in maybe January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that time, I've actually gone back to work, to the same job. And it was really interesting my first day back, because I kind of was like looking over some of the old messages in my team's inbox, and it really did feel like I was looking at messages that were sent by, it kind of just reminded me of the kind of headspace I was in before I took this break from work. And I felt like there was such a big transformation and such a big difference, which I'm so grateful for. And the course has definitely been a big part of that, for sure. And the time that we've spent together as a cohort. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So before you found this work, how would you describe your relationship with your own body? How in it were you? Was it something you listened to, something you managed?
I was dissociated a lot of the time. And so I felt like a lot of the time I walked around not even realizing I had a body, to be honest. Like it was, I feel like and if ever there was a sensation that did come up, usually it would have to get to like a crisis point for me to finally be able to feel something. And when that happened, it was difficult at the time, but looking back, I feel like it's like you were saying with the work thing, like it was something that needed to happen in order for me to return to my body. So yeah, I think disconnection was the primary way that my primary relationship with my body before I kind of entered this work.
And where are you today? How has it changed? How do you feel? Not even today, right now. How do you feel?
Right now, I feel settled, and like I can really feel my feet against the ground. I can really feel my seat against the chair. I can feel my back against the backrest. I think internally, it feels like there's a lot of movement happening internally, just because of maybe it's just how much your great questions are kind of getting me to thinking about things. But there's a lot of kind of an up and down movement happening in my torso right now. Yeah. And
That
it's
sounds
amazing
like-
actually to...
Go on. It's amazing, actually.
Oh, sorry. It's amazing to... I'm really glad you asked me this question, because I feel like it's such a difference to... I think if you'd have asked me that question a couple of years ago, maybe even like 9 months ago, I would have really struggled to answer it without like having to do some grounding first. So yeah, it just feels really nice to be able to answer that in the way that I did just now. So thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that sounds like a very deep connection and a very present one, where you were able to so promptly come back with how it's actually feeling. And I think that's all we're trying to get to, right? Like just being connected, how it's showing up, how the body is actually showing up is not of as much relevance as it is that we are just able to observe how it is. Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm so happy that you're not where you were 9 months ago, and this is where you are, and that the questions and this just conversation is helping some parts of you land. I really love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One other part of the course that has stayed with me, definitely, that crosses my mind often, is our power and privilege circle, because it puts so much into perspective for me in terms of the things sometimes I sit with guilt over, things sometimes I sit with happiness over, gratefulness over, just a lot of that. Recognizing some of those things, and I've been thinking of my own experience of it, and that kind of brought me to thinking how have mainstream wellness spaces, if whichever ones you have entered, even if not mainstream, just wellness spaces that you have been a part of, how have they felt for you as a Muslim woman? Have you ever had to leave parts of yourself at the door?
Yeah, so I think with more conventional, like what people think of when you think of wellness spaces, as I said before, that's something that I had never really explored or ventured into. And I think a part of that is because I knew that they wouldn't really be able to offer me what I felt I needed. But in the spaces that I have been, again, spaces that I feel aren't seen as wellness spaces, they've been places of, a lot of it has been personal, actually. It's kind of just been my own personal practice. And so there's a sense of deep nourishment that I get from that. But when I think of things that I've done in community, a lot of it comes from my faith. I think there's so many practices in Islam, especially, if you think, for example, of praying 5 times a day, and the word for prayer is actually salah, which means connection. And the idea behind it is that you take some time out of your day, whatever's happening, no matter how chaotic it is, and you reconnect with the divine. And other practices around, fasting during Ramadan and the huge kind of community focus that has. And again, it's kind of, I'm just thinking about that in comparison to wellness spaces, and, what they would call maybe intermittent fasting is something that we've kind of been practicing. And I feel like it's, people in general, I feel like faith tends to be overlooked in these conventional wellness spaces, and the ways that people's faith contribute to their sense of wellness, whether it's with Islam or even with the kind of Hindu roots of conscious connected breathing. And you see it a lot with yoga, right? And so, yeah, I think I will say also in other, I guess therapy would kind of count as a wellness space, wouldn't it? And so my experience with that has been a bit of a rocky one, because most of my therapists have been, of course, they've been non-Muslim, and I've found myself just having to translate how my faith plays into whatever it is that we're discussing. And that is just so exhausting. It's really like having to translate all the time is really tiring. So, but yeah, I was really lucky eventually to have found and this was actually at the festival that I spoke about earlier, found a kind of Sufi-leaning Muslim IFS, internal family systems counselor. And what's really great about that is that he actually brings in these kind of Sufi ideas around the self, which is called the nafs, and the different states you can enter, and aligning that or drawing parallels with what's taught in IFS. So, for instance, the self energy would correlate to the settled self in Islam, which is called, I think, nafsul mutma'inna. And it was really beautiful that he made that connection, because what it did for me is that it just allowed our sessions to land in a much deeper place, because it was kind of speaking a language that I was already familiar with. And so that's the therapy side of things. But yeah, it's really interesting actually looking back now how I really have avoided wellness spaces. And I remember actually when I was signing up for this course with Inspire Breathwork, I was really nervous about it because of that. And I'd sent Hannah like a really long email just being like, it's my first time being in like a group kind of setting where you're focused on the breath. But yeah, this course is delivered in such a way that, you know, it's undoing and unlearning a lot of like what the wellness industry, a lot of the ways that the wellness industry, I guess, fail us. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've successfully avoided all of it, like you said, not all, but like you've recognized when it's not been the correct room for you, which is definitely to be commended. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was definitely a journey. Like I think the journey has been recognizing the strength in that, because for a long time, I think when one of the earlier questions you asked, I was talking about how I felt like in order to step into healing work, I had to have like done that kind of work and everything. And so this course has actually really helped me reframe that actually I have been in wellness spaces. They just don't look like the typical wellness spaces when we think of them. And so that's been a really nice way to kind of recognize where power already kind of exists in the communities that I'm a part of. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you said wellness spaces, and in my mind, I was like, yeah, the non-traditional one also is a kitchen. A kitchen is a huge wellness space for me, for you as well, as we've discussed before. Yeah, so I suppose a lot of these don't look like mainstream wellness because there has become a certain model for it, or to, you know, ultimately the same ideas, systems of capitalism, colonialism, and white body supremacy. A lot of that has played into mainstream wellness spaces looking the way they do right now. Yeah. So it's beautiful that you've stuck to the ones that felt indigenous and more to your beat instead of jumping into things just because. And thankfully, Hannah's course and Inspire Breathwork is definitely one of the top places I've found who is walking the talk. Yeah, I always get confused with that phrase because I'm like, is it talking the walk or is it walking the talk? Because both of them feel equally important to me. Like, how are words not as important as walking around the words? Yeah, but yeah, they've really followed through. And I feel that in every interaction I have, even about this podcast that I'm doing, and when I speak to the team about all the work we're doing on it, there's so much space for expansion, for just, trying new things out and trying to dismantle what already exists as a structure and letting your creativity kind of take charge and letting it flow in that way, which has been beautiful for me also. It's been a very transformatory work experience as well. Beyond the course, of course, where I have played the student more than I have played a human being. No, but that's not great because I've been playing the role of the student because it's coming from performance instead of just existing. But I'm trying to do more of the existing. Yeah. Yeah. But so it's been wonderful to have encouragement for that because the whole organization is kind of structured and functioning that way. So it's definitely encouraged me to lean into it more. Yeah. What do you think it would have meant for a younger Zahra to see herself, someone who looked like her, felt like her, leading a breathwork session?
My initial response to this is like, I would have been so jealous. Like I want that. Which is what jealousy is, right? I feel like jealousy is so villainized, but it really is just an emotion that points to our desires, right? And just being able to make peace with that. But once I moved through that, I feel like it just would have meant so much, because for somebody who looks like me to get to a point of kind of facilitating breath work, I think I'm so like painfully aware of all the barriers you'd have to kind of pass through to get there, and all of the unlearning you would have to do. And so I'd be also intensely curious about what that path looked like for her. And to receive a session from somebody who's walked that path, who's kind of ahead of me in their breathwork journey, but who is kind of grounded in the same kind of cultural realities as me. I mean, it feels so far out that it's almost hard to imagine what that could have possibly meant, Like I know I would have felt incredibly seen. I would have felt incredibly held. And I think understood, knowing that, oh my God, there's no translation that needs to happen here, And that's just one example of like one of the barriers to, sessions outside of that kind of thing. So yeah, it would have meant a lot.
Do you feel complete? Feel like there's a word stuck there?
Yeah, maybe there is something. Let me sit with it for a second.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I don't think there is anything. Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, I think curiosity is one of our best mates. And that you have so much for it is beautiful. And I hear you on the translation. The exhaustion of the constant translation can be so much. So when it's like imagining yourself in that position, it feels so freeing. I love that. So we're nearing the end here a little bit. And so I thought maybe some reflections for us could be kind of sweet to go through. What do you think is And whatever is alive for you right now, I'm happy to hear, because I feel like these are things that change constantly and change every day almost with how we feel about our own existence and our journey. So just to open with that thought, what is the one belief about yourself that this work has most challenged when you look back today?
I think my sense of like limiting my power. Because what this course is doing is that it's showing me that I know much more than I think I know. And it's giving me the language for it. So it's actually been a really difficult thing to move through. And I find it really confronting as well when I think about my tendency to play small and to hide. And it's something that I'm moving through for sure. But on the other side of that, I really do feel like there is a sense of expansiveness and rootedness that is available to me by fully meeting the discomfort of like all the ways that I've made myself smaller and I've shrunk myself and I've not expressed myself. And I think one of the big blocks around like shifting out of that or letting go of that is the grief around like how much of my life has been spent in that way and how much how unaware I was of my own voice and my own power. Yeah, but I think it's something that I'll stay with and see where it leads. Yeah.
Those are powerful realizations. Okay, lovely. And if you had to reflect on the time that has gone by from when you discovered some of this about yourself to where you are today, what habit of mind or body or soul has been the hardest for you to put down?
Yeah, I think it's what I mentioned before around the hiding and the shrinking. Because I know that there are times in class, for example, where I feel like I could definitely contribute and say something, and I have an idea of what it is that I want to share, but I hold myself back from sharing. And it's something that also, I think, plays out in outside of the breathwork sessions as well, outside of our course. Funnily enough, I think the only place where it disappears is when I'm dancing. So, yeah, I think for me, the task now is to be with that a bit longer and feel into it in my body and see what wisdom my body contains around that and work with that. And I think also having a lot of compassion for it too, and recognizing that it serves a protective purpose, and that it's my system trying to keep me feel safe. And also, like, it's such a common thing for women of color, isn't it, to shrink themselves and to not feel safe being seen in their light. And so there's a lot of kind of compassion that I can find for myself in that. I think just knowing that it's part of a systemic problem and a response to kind of the experiences that I've had.
Yeah, that's a great reflection. And sitting with compassion for yourself sounds exactly the direction to take towards most of our existence and towards the world around us. Thanks for that beautiful last thought. Zahra, as we all move towards facilitating, who is the person you most want to be in the room with? Who are you thinking about? What kind of person, what kind of entity are you thinking about when you imagine the work that you want to do?
Can you expand on this question a little bit for me, just so I've understood it fully?
Yes, of course. Are there communities in your mind that you might know you want to serve? Do they belong to a specific cultural set? Do they belong to a specific gender? Do they belong to people, say, with navigating burnout? Those whose stories mirror your own. And I suppose, what do you want for those people to know breathwork could offer them?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think I want to work with, where I'm at with that right now is that I want to work with women of color in particular, who particularly ones who have kind of been burnt out or have been experiencing the exhaustion or the lack of rest that we've talked about earlier on. And also generally women who have had a sense or have a really strong sense that their life is, as it's playing out, feels smaller than it could be, and they want to kind of cultivate and nurture that sense of expansiveness, whatever that means for them. I would love to kind of create a space for people that will act both as a place of rest, but also as a place of discovery, and a space for people to feel like they can shine, and yeah, I think that's probably what calls to me the most is creating a container for women to kind of explore new ways of being in the world and to return to their bodies, and through that return to be able to imagine kind of new things for themselves, not from a place of grasping or anything like that, but from a place of what is it that my body needs and craves, and what haven't I allowed my body to do, despite it kind of calling out to me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And for anyone listening and who might resonate with a lot of what you said, where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram as Zahra's Table. And yeah, I would, if anyone kind of resonated with what I said today, I would absolutely love, if you're based in London as well, or you don't mind the journey, I'd love to see you at one of my next supper clubs or my next whirling performance, which is happening in July. But yeah, for more details around that will be on my Instagram.
And we'll also be sure to leave all of that information in the summary of this episode. Thank you for bringing us to that sweet close. Zahra, thank you so much, genuinely. I came into this conversation today already knowing you quite a bit, and I'm so grateful that I got a chance to know you even more now. And there's something about speaking in public together, I think, that does that. And we were discussing the strangeness in that for the first time. Thank you that what you offered today is not a tidy story of transformation. It's definitely something more honest. It's the image of a woman with your journey in the middle of it, still carrying things, moving through them with compassion, and still learning to put them down. choosing day by day to take up more space and shine brighter. I don't think that's a small thing at all. And I am genuinely so honored to be walking alongside with you.
Thank you so much. And I feel the exact same way. There's just really enjoyed this conversation. And there's so much that I'll be taking away from it as well. And I look forward to continuing our journey together and seeing where it takes us.
After every conversation in this space, I like to sit with a poem. Not to wrap things up neatly, not to summarize what we just said either, just to let another profound voice carry us a little further. And today, I want to offer you something by Lucille Clifton. Clifton was a Black American poet laureate who wrote with extraordinary economy and power. She could crack something open in 6 lines that other writers couldn't reach in 6 pages at times. She spent her life writing about the body, about womanhood, about survival, about what it means to inhabit yourself fully and without apology. This poem by her is called "Won't You Celebrate With Me?" It's an invitation, and I invite you to just receive it. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come, celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Each time I read this poem, I get caught on that last line. Something has tried to kill me and has failed. She isn't talking about one thing. She's talking about all of it. The systems, the erasures, the grinding demand to make yourself smaller, quieter, more convenient. And what she offers in return is not anger. It's a celebration. An invitation to stand on that bridge between starshine and clay, between where you came from and where you're going, holding your own hand and calling that a life. That's what Zahra has been sitting with today. Rest, not as absence, not as surrender, but as the quiet, daily, radical act of saying, I refuse to be consumed. Something has tried to extinguish the stillness in us. And every time we choose the breath instead of the brace, every time we stop, it fails. What stays with me from this conversation is something Zahra said about not knowing who she was without the doing. I think a lot of us live there in that constant motion because stillness asks us a question we haven't yet learned to answer. This work, the breath work, the course, the slow unlearning, is teaching us to sit with that question without flinching. And Zahra is doing that with a grace and an honesty that I found genuinely moving. She is in the middle of her first year. She is not finished. None of us are. None of us will ever be. And that is exactly the point. So next month, we go to a place that so many of us find the hardest of all. We're going to talk about what happens after the session, after the ceremony, after the breakthrough, when you have to come back to your actual life and figure out what to do with everything that shifted, the integration, the unglamorous, creative, essential work of making it real, of making it embodied, the praxis. I cannot wait to bring that conversation to you. If today's episode is still moving through you, if something landed somewhere unexpected, here are a few small things I want to invite you into before you leave. Subscribe to the Inspire Breathwork Podcast wherever you listen. Each episode this season is part of something larger, a full arc, a full journey, and I want you to have every piece of it. If this conversation spoke to something you perhaps recognize, pass it on. Think of the one person in your life who is running on empty and has no idea that they have permission to stop. You don't need to explain it, just send it. They will know it's for them. And if Zahra's story called to something in you, if you want to explore this work with her directly, her details are in the show notes. Please reach out. She is building something rooted and real, and it might be exactly what you've been looking for. Thank you for being here. Thank you for trusting this space, for trusting me. Until next month, move at the pace of your own body. Take up every inch of space that is yours. And remember, the pause is not empty. It is where you remember who you are. Take good care.